This is a story of the world's youngest known female serial killer. This girl starts off super creepy and weird, like classic horror movie creepy little girl. But then as she gets older and you kind of start to see her background, it really does beg the question of nature versus nurture. Mary Bell was just 11 years old when she was diagnosed with psychopathic personality disorder in the run-up to her trial for killing 2 toddlers in 1968. She was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison, but at the age of 23, she was released and she was given a pseudonym, and the court granted her legal anonymity for life. I know what you're thinking. I'm thinking it too. What the hell? Why do they let these people out? This photo of her as a child shows how absolutely disturbed she was. Belle was only 10 years old when she strangled 4-year-old Martin Brown to death. She also left some incredibly disturbing notes at the scene. Look at these notes. Like, I think she meant fuck off there, but she wrote of. Fuck of. We murder. Watch something, Fanny and faggot. You are Minky. You use. We murder Martin Brown. You look out. There are murders about by Fanny and you screws. What?
I think you might be dyslexic, bro. I'm not reading this. I'm gonna.
No, please,
I think you might be dyslexic.
Just read the script once.
Okay, you want me to read the script?
Yes.
All right.
And action.
I'll read the words you wrote. Hello, fellow American. This you should vote. Me. I leave power. Good. Thank you.
I murder so that I may come back. We did murder Martin Brown. Fuck of you bustering. This is a 10-year-old doing this, and it is written in what could literally be crayon. It's just like scrawled handwriting in there. It is horrifying and honestly really sad. 2 months after Belle killed Martin Brown, she killed a 3-year-old boy named Brian Howe. She also attempted to strangle several other children after this, and in the notes that she left at the scenes, she said that she wanted to keep killing. Mary Bell's mother, Elizabeth Bell, who went by the nickname Betty, was not really a good mom. She was absent from home most of the time, and she was off traveling to Glasgow where she worked as a prostitute. Mary was Betty's second child, and Betty had her when she was just 17 years old and really was not prepared to be a mother. The identity of Mary's biological father is unknown, but she was led to believe that he was a man named William Bell. Everyone called him Billy, and Billy was a violent alcoholic and a career criminal. Mary was totally an unwanted child and experienced a life full of neglect and abuse, frankly. Listen to this. According to her aunt, Isa McCricket, or Isa, I don't know, but her aunt said that when Betty was in the hospital and she gave birth to Mary, that the nurses tried to hand her her baby. And Betty was like, quote, "Take the thing away from me." She didn't even want the baby. It was like a complete and utter burden to even be having it. And she absolutely wanted nothing to do with Mary from before Mary was even born. Mary also frequently suffered injuries in household accidents while she was growing up. This led members of the family to believe that Betty was being like intentionally neglectful to her daughter at a minimum. Or at the worst, some people believed that Betty was actually, like on a couple of occasions, actually intentionally trying to harm her daughter or kill her own daughter. They believed this for a number of reasons. They believed this after a number of different things happened to Mary in her childhood. For instance, when Betty dropped her out of a first-floor window. Or that one time Betty fed her a bunch of sleeping pills. Or that one time Betty sold Mary to a mentally unstable woman who was unable to have children of her own. That instance resulted in Mary's older sister, Catherine, having to go and rescue Mary from the woman's house and bring her back home. One of the saddest and most perplexing things about this is that despite all of the abuse of her daughter, Betty continuously refused offers from other family members to take in Mary. So people saw that there was a problem. They offered to help. They're like, we will take her. She can stay with family and just not have to freaking deal with you. God, Betty, what the fuck? I guess she assumed that if family took her, she would still have some kind of responsibility, or she would still have to see her daughter. I don't know. It really seems like Betty had other plans for her daughter. Betty soon began taking Mary to work with her. In the mid-60s, she allegedly allowed and or encouraged some of her clients to sexually abuse her daughter. At this time, Betty was working as a dominatrix, so some of this sex was pretty intense. Sexual abuse is not okay regardless, but when you're adding another layer of intensity to it, that's scary. That's scary for a child. And, you know, I'm sure going to work with her mom and seeing her mom as a dominatrix would have been confusing for a young girl. Betty didn't just participate by facilitating and allowing this to happen. She also straight up participated in these sessions while she was a dominatrix that involved her daughter, including several in which she blindfolded Mary, restrained her hands behind her back, and forced her to perform oral sex on clients. Her daughter, her young freaking daughter, I can't even comprehend that. Hell, I couldn't comprehend doing anything sexual with a family member ever, at any age. But wow, Betty is a piece of work. Awful, awful woman. Both at home and at school, Mary exhibited signs of disturbed and unpredictable behavior. I am not shocked, considering all of the things that she was going through at home. This included sudden mood swings and chronic bedwetting. Enuresis is very common for children who have been abused and who suffer from anxiety disorders. So I'm not surprised about the bedwetting, and I'm also not surprised about her mood swings, especially if her mother's been giving her sleeping pills or dropped her out a window or is making her perform acts on clients when she's just a young girl. I mean, even if she was a teenager, it would still be abusive, but it just hits me in a different way. The fact that her daughter wasn't even, I mean, her daughter committed these murders at 10, and this stuff was happening before that. Mary also often fought with other children, and apparently she attempted to strangle several of her peers on a number of different occasions. On one occasion, she attempted to block a girl's airway with sand. I'm just imagining them on the playground, like handfuls of sand just packing them down this girl's mouth, like into her throat, trying to suffocate her to death. None of that behavior is excusable, but like the treatment she received from her mother, those anger issues and behavioral problems make a lot of sense. This violent behavior made other classmates not want to socialize with Mary. They were reluctant to interact with her, and that is totally understandable. According to one classmate, her peers knew what sudden changes in Mary's demeanor meant, and when she began exhibiting certain mannerisms like shaking her head and staring, they knew she was about to become violent. There was one child who spent her free time with Mary, though. A 13-year-old girl named Norma Joyce Bell. She was actually the daughter of a neighbor. So Mary and Norma became friends, just, I guess, by circumstance of living next to each other. And yeah, their last name was Bell. Mary Bell and Norma Bell. But apparently there was no relation between them. It was just like a coincidence. The second boy who Mary killed, Brian Howe, actually was seen playing with Mary Bell and Norma Bell shortly before he died. Shortly before he was murdered. Both of the girls were pretty evasive when talking to law enforcement about what happened, and the statements that they gave were also contradictory, but they both did admit to seeing him and talking to him. The next day, Mary told police that she remembers seeing an 8-year-old boy playing with Brian that afternoon. She said she'd also seen him hitting the boy. Mary also told police that the boy looked like he was covered in grass and weeds, and that it seemed like he'd been rolling around in a field or something, and that he was also holding a pair of scissors. She told the police, quote, "I saw him trying to cut a cat's tail off with the scissors, but there was something wrong with them. One leg was broken or bent." The detective chief inspector, James Dobson, said that this statement seemed to be self-incriminating because The police had found a pair of scissors at the scene, but only the police knew that the scissors were there. Like, no one else could have known this unless they themselves were there. Also, the boy who she named had an alibi, and his alibi was pretty good too. He was at the airport with his parents the afternoon that all of this had happened. And there were numerous reliable witnesses to corroborate his alibi. Also, Mary's friend Norma, well, her mother, Catherine, not to be confused with Mary's sister, Catherine, two Catherine Bells in this story, she came forward to testify that months before the death of Brian Howe, she had caught Mary trying to strangle Norma's younger sister, Susan. Catherine and her husband walked in, seeing Mary try to strangle their younger daughter, Susan, and Mary literally wouldn't let go. Like, no matter what they said, she would not let go, and it took Norma's dad punching Mary to get her to stop. He had to punch Mary in the shoulder to get her to release her grip on their younger daughter, Susan. At her trial, a child psychologist named Ian Fraser testified that although her capability to know right from wrong was limited by her age, she was still capable of appreciating the criminality of the acts she was accused of committing. Belle was initially detained in a series of remand homes before she was transferred to a secure unit at a young offenders institution, and at this detention center, she was the only female inmate, which I'm sure was quite a shock. Belle would later claim that she was sexually assaulted by a staff member and a number of inmates at this facility. I mean, she's the only female inmate there, so like, that was frickin' predictable, come on. In November of 1973, at the age of 16, she was transferred again. Apparently, she resented this transfer, and she also unsuccessfully applied for parole. Now, I don't know why she would resent the transfer if she was being sexually assaulted at another facility. I don't really get that. I don't have the full picture of what she meant by that. But yeah, I think what she resented was her mother. In June of 1976, she was transferred again, but this time to an open prison. At this new facility, she was able to take a secretarial course so she could learn a skill, learn how to be a secretary. 15 months later, in September of 1977, Mary Belle and a fellow inmate named Annette Priest absconded from the open prison into the company of two men from Blackpool. They slept in various local hotels, and she used the alias Mary Robinson. On September 13, 1977, Mary Belle was arrested at the Derbyshire home of one of the men who she'd kind of met and run off with, Clive Shirtcliffe. She had also dyed her hair blonde in an effort to disguise herself. Honestly, I kind of feel bad for her in this case. Like, she left the prison, but she didn't pull a Ted Bundy and go murder some people in a sorority house, you know? She just wanted to have kind of a boyfriend experience, I guess, and stayed at some hotels with this guy and then like went to his house. She returned to custody of the facility and she lost prison privileges for 28 days. That was her punishment for escaping. But she was preparing for release. In June of 1979, she was transferred to another facility, an open prison facility, to prepare her for kind of integrating back into society. Beginning in November 1979, she started working as a secretary. All of this was supervised. So she, under supervision, was able to work as a secretary and then as a waitress in a cafe. Then in May of 1980, Mary Belle was released from prison. She was 23 years old and at that point had been in custody for 11 and a half years. She was granted anonymity in the form of a new name, and she was allowed to begin living her new life in another part of the country under this assumed identity. Upon her release, a spokesman is quoted as saying this: "Belle wishes to be given the chance to live a normal life and to be left alone." 2 young children were murdered, so that's probably never going to happen for her. If anyone figures out what her identity is, she's not going to be left alone. 4 years after her release, on May 25th, 1984, Belle gave birth to a daughter. Her daughter knew nothing about her mom's life. So she was born in 1984, and it wasn't until 1998 when she discovered who her mom really was. Some reporters discovered that Belle was staying in a resort town on the Sussex coast. I guess this was such a big story that it forced Belle and her 14-year-old daughter to be escorted to a safe house by undercover officers. Both she and her daughter later relocated to another part of the UK. The right to anonymity for Mary Belle's daughter ran out when she reached the age of 18. In May of 2003, Mary Belle won a court battle in order to have both her own anonymity and that of her daughter extended for life. Then in 2009, Mary Belle's granddaughter was born, and this was extended for her granddaughter. The order prohibits the divulging of any aspects of their lives which may identify them. In 1988, Belle collaborated with author Gira Sireni. I hope I'm saying her name right, but she collaborated with her to tell her story from before and after her crimes. Sireni's 1998 book is called Cries Unheard: The Story of Mary Belle. In this book, Belle details the abuse that she suffered at the hands of her dominatrix sex worker mother and also her mother's clients. According to Sireni, Mary Belle fully admits that she was not wrongly convicted, and she also says that the abuse that she suffered from her mother does not excuse the crimes that she committed. I thought that was interesting because it's such an important aspect of owning the things that you do. I mean, she apparently was sentenced to life, right? But she got out at age 23. So clearly something happened and there was a shift that made it so that they thought she would be okay in society. I personally am very, very curious to know if Mary Belle would have done any of this if her mother was not if she had a different mother, basically, because the kind of abuse that she suffered is so horrific. Like, I mean, most kids wouldn't react by killing toddlers. It's also, I'm not going to say it's understandable because it's not. It's honestly baffling. Most kids would just get mad or maybe start fights or something. The bedwetting makes sense. The mood swings make sense. But the strangling and choking and killing 2 young children, that is so inexcusable and beyond what most children, like how most children would react. So though at just age 10, she was diagnosed with psychopathic personality disorder, I am curious to know if there are still remnants of that or if that was just an expression from her frustration as being a young child. Because like 10, your brain is barely developed and she clearly wasn't like socialized properly. And one thing to me that shows that she has kind of changed is the account of when she, escaped. Her and her friend like absconded from the prison. They kind of just went to go party with some guys. Like, they weren't trying to go commit crimes or kill anybody. It just seemed like they wanted a normal life. And, she has a daughter and a grandchild now. So, I don't know a lot about her because she's living an anonymous life. But it seems like she did integrate into society. She probably has a normal job and whatever. So good for her. It's kind of weird to say that to somebody who killed 2 children, but I'm sure she feels awful about it. I'm sure it's not the life she would have chosen for herself. And because she was so young when she did these crimes, giving a 10-year-old life in prison with that kind of background, to me, I think she deserved the chance to rehabilitate, and she proved that she could. This also happened in the UK, so ultimately the system is just so vastly different from the system in the United States. Like, I don't know what would have happened to her here, but I don't think it would be that. Maybe I'm wrong about that, I don't know. What do you guys think? Anyways, this was a story of the youngest known female serial killer, Mary Belle. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please subscribe to murderpm.com. That is Murder Pop Magazine, my platform. If you want to support me, the link is in the description below. My name is Victoria Evans. Be safe out there.